Welcome back to Count Me In. I'm your host, Adam Larson, and today I'm joined by John Rubinetti, president of B2B Payments at Deluxe, to talk about one of the hottest topics in finance, automation in accounts payable and accounts receivable. John brings a wealth of experience and some striking stats, like the fact that 71% of mid-market companies haven't automated their AP or AR, losing valuable time each month. Together, we explore why manual processes are still so widespread and the biggest barriers to automating, and how to make the leap to more efficient systems, even when your team or customers are used to the old ways. We also cover what to look for in automation solutions that can grow with your business and handle whatever the future of payments might bring. If you're looking to modernize your finance processes and free up more time for what really matters, this episode is for you. Let's get started. Well, John, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today. And today we're going to be really focusing on AP, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and that automation. And, as our listeners know, they're all accounting and finance professionals. It's essential for managing your company's cash flow, for your financial health. It's like a liability. It's a list on your reports. And you gotta, automation is super important. And so maybe we could start a little bit about talking about why are we talking? Why is this a topic for a podcast? AP and AR automation.
Yeah, look, from my perspective, right? I've been talking about this for the past year. We did some studies around mid-market companies, right? And what percent have AP or AR automation. And the numbers were astounding, right? 71% of both, right? We did it for AR, we did it for AP. 71% of mid-market companies do not have an automated AP or AR, right? They are spending 14 hours a month manually reconciled, going into 3 or 4 different systems, right, to pull information together. So when you talk about kind of why it's so important for them, right, cash flow, they're spending more time reconciling, different payment types that they get and making payments than they are doing the things that they should be doing, which is better cash flow, right? Using the data better, right? And so when I look at those statistics, right, and when you take that 14 hours a month, that's 1 month of productivity loss. And so these are mid-market companies, right? They need, and cash flow is so important to them. I would much rather have them spend 30 days worth of looking at making sure that they have the right negotiated payment terms with suppliers, or are receiving payments the right way. Like, that's where they should be spending time. So that's why, for me, I've been talking about, everybody wants to talk about AI and everybody wants to talk about all the fancy things and real-time payments and all of that. But I want to just talk about the basics, because many of these mid-market companies need the basics, just need to automate flows and have one place to go. And so at Deluxe, that's what we're trying to deliver. And that's what we have with our 360 plus receivables platform and our DPX plus payments platform. So that's kind of why it's important to me.
It is super important. And you talked about like the 14 hours, that 14 hours it adds up, as you mentioned, so when we're looking at automation, obviously automation speeds things up, which is great, which is wonderful. But, how do you keep up with that, especially when you have to integrate with other systems? And there can be a lot of challenges going from checking 4 or 5 different systems to an automated type system. What does that transition look like?
Yeah. And I think when you think about speed, right? Speed isn't just about a faster transaction, right? It's about freeing up those finance folks to focus on the cash flow, the reducing errors, minimizing risk for the company, right? And so, when I think about the integration there, it is the difference between what we'll say is looking digital versus actually being digital, right? And so, when you have a siloed ERP, or, the banking systems, right, that are disconnected, right? They're not part of the flow. That's where the pitfalls come, right? And so, yes, you could, use a new payment type, but if you don't have the following data, you don't have the ability to kind of match, right, prior, right? And so when we think about, we'll take receivables for a second, our R360 Plus platform, what that does is it pulls all of those different types, the payment types, the credit card, this ACH, the wire, the check, which is a big
Hmm.
deal, right? You got still 40% of B2B is still check. And so when you can have one place to pull that in and for a finance person to focus there, that's the integration that you need. And we're trying to do it so that they don't have to. We just have one place to give them and everything kind of flows through there. So when we think about integration, we think about doing that for them. Same thing with our payable solution. Just takes a file from
Hmm.
from one of their systems, and whether it's Intuit, right, or just takes the file, gets in there, makes the payments, takes it back in, and so it just makes it more seamless. So we're trying to offer a solution that already does that integration for them and has it, so that they don't have to do it. Because you're right, that integration piece is painful for them. They don't have the resources, right, and the technology, so it's a cost. And so if we
Hmm.
could do that for them and deliver, a comprehensive solution to a mid-market company, it's very beneficial to them because the implementation is not as complex.
So you talk a lot, a lot about the end state, when somebody gets to that point of they're integrated, they're going well, and they can focus on the things they're supposed to focus on. Can you talk a little bit what it's like when you work with organizations when you're making that transition? What is it like taking somebody who's so used to checking things, doing the paper checks, doing those things, and trying to transition to that? Like, how is it moving that system? Because in today's day and age, some of us hear that and they're probably like, what? People are still using checks? But as you said, 40%, I've talked to other AP people and they're like, yeah, a lot of people are still using checks and we got to get out of that. But what's it like making that transition and how can you prepare your teams for that?
Yeah, and when I talk to my folks about how to set up that initial call, right? When you're talking to an AP or an AR person, they're thinking in their mind that their job's in jeopardy, right? And I totally get it. I spent a number of years as a consultant, so I understand when you walk in, people go, they're on edge. They're not maybe as transparent. And so, when we talk to the CFO, right, or in some of the smaller companies, maybe it's not a big team, right, but it is still a team. And when you talk about what the benefits are, and you're transparent about what really they could be doing versus all those manual things, and make them feel part of the process and part of helping the process, because the goal shouldn't be to just remove people because now you have an easy automated system. You still need those folks. You need those finance brains, right, and the schooling and the training that they go through. There's a reason for it. Now, I love my CFO, right? She's fantastic because she thinks the way I don't, right? And she helps me. And so these folks are valuable, but you need to make sure that they're part of the process and feel like
Mhm.
there's you're improving their life, right? And their stuff so that they can do more for the company. And that sounds like a cliche, but honestly, no mid-market company wants to, you know, get rid of people. They want to just optimize people because they know they need to work. They know they have intellectual capital, right, about the business and the years of doing it. But getting them to kind of be on the same page is important in part of the discovery process. We'll call it. I don't even like to call it a sales process. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're trying to help your business.
Mhm.
So
It was like the cough was like I was like trying to see if it was gonna come, and then I'm gonna take a sip of water here.
God.
I think that's great advice, especially bringing the right stakeholders in, especially when you're working on a project like this, because the folks who've been doing the paper checks, have been doing the manual work, they know the process inside and out, so they can look at an automated system. So, well, actually, we're missing this part. How do we get that incorporated in there? And that input is so valuable, especially when you're implementing a new system like that.
Well, and it also helps when you do implement it because, as opposed to them holding back some of that stuff. But you're right.
Hmm.
They know the ins and outs. They know, Sally from this company is going to call them, right?
Yeah.
Like they know. And what she's going to ask, and she's going to say, I need this information. Well, if we can make it so that she sees that, right, we help both sides.
Hmm.
And I talked about it on another one, creating what I call a win-win-win, right? It's a win for the company, but it's also a win for the supplier, right? Or your payer, whoever it is. If there's good communication there and good understanding of what they need and what you need. I always say if we sell something to a company, but they don't really take into consideration how their payers or how their suppliers utilize it, well, then we're only fixing part of the process because there's still going to be pain there. And so
Yeah.
that's why when we like to do that, we like to talk about the whole process, talk about your relationship with the suppliers, talk about, your payment terms and what you're trying to do, because then, you know, you can start to understand you're not just solving your issues, but they may be calling you for, a couple times a month and they're asking for the same information if you could have. So that's the kind of
Yeah.
stuff where those folks, that's why I say those folks are so valuable, because you're right. They know this process inside and out.
Mhm. So speaking of them knowing their customers really well, what about if you have customers who are resistant, who are saying, I only want to do paper checks till, this, I'm insisting this is what I have to do. But in a modern world, can those things coexist still? Like, how can that still work?
Yeah, it's funny because again, everybody wants to talk about real time payments and
Yeah.
that being a better payment, and and digitizing the payment. Well, if you don't digitize the supplemental information that's needed to reconcile and to get the exceptions, you're really only digitizing part of the process, right? So, you know, I I like to kind of talk to those folks to say, look, first thing we got to do is identify the manual gaps. Identify where you're touching,
Mhm.
don't worry about the payment type first. Just let's talk about what you do, how you receive it, and where it goes. Because the reason checks are still utilized so much is because of the supplemental data, right? Like
Yeah.
and through a lockbox, you have that access. So you have it there, right? And so it may not just be about getting rid of checks. It's just about, can you get the same data and the same flow and be able to manage exceptions by utilizing other payment types? And from our perspective, yes, we are the 110-year-old original check company. So we don't want to see checks leave tomorrow. They're not going to. But we also want to help our customers. We want to control that flow to say, hey, we have a tool that if you do ACH, we can pull in that data so you can match it up sooner. Same thing with card, right? So we're creating a tool based on kind of what we know about the check flow process and why remittance data is so important. And we're then utilizing it in a way to pull in all the other payment types. And then we could say, hey, if you want to reduce checks, here's the way to do it, because you want to push them to the other payment types that you already receive. And it can be, you can utilize the system to check exceptions first, right? And do matching and those kind of things automated. So you're not picking up and looking at 3 different spreadsheets to try to match payments or pull an email that has, the remittance data from the card payment, right? Those are things that flow is so important. So it's less about the specific payment type, because
Mhm.
we enable all those rails and pull them into one place to automate the process, not just the
Mhm.
payment.
Gotcha.
That's the
I
way
like
we
that.
think about
Yeah, because it's like some people will still want to use that, and they have automated ways to send checks that it almost feels like it's digital, but it's like everything feels automated. But some people have that system and it works well for them, and so you want to be able to take all those types of payments and still automate your side of it as much as possible.
it. Right. Exactly.
Jeez.
It's all right.
Sorry, I just need to get my thoughts because I realized I'm like, after I coughed, I was like, wait, I just lost my train of thought. And so I'm like, okay, where was I thinking about going? And that's the worst when you're
Yep.
in the middle of a conversation, but we'll get it. Um, actually, this is all right. So we talked about integration. We kind of were touching on like the digital modernization kind of topic a little bit, right? Where we were talking about that. So we've talked about getting your system automated and the importance of that, and how you can still coexist with some older techniques, but you can still bring it all into an automation, and you can still bring it to a nice automation ecosystem within your platform, within your tech stack, to make sure that it flows really nicely. And so I think all those, I think we've kind of outlined that. But as we're looking at, that question's not working. Okay, sorry. I don't know okay, what do you mean by modern payment rails in that document they sent me? Because I feel like I'm not saying something, like I feel like I wasn't framing the question right to talk about modern payment rails.
Okay. So they were kind of saying, what steps should businesses take to truly optimize modern payment rails like RTP? Kind of what I was saying
Okay.
earlier, right?
Yeah.
We're not, Deluxe, we're not about, keeping payment types out, right? So we want
Okay.
all the modern payment types. What we want to make
Got you.
sure is that the flow of the supporting data, the reconciliation piece, right? The things that have to be matched in order to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where for us, you know, we standardize across all the different
Okay.
rails
All right. I get
to
it.
make
I
it.
understand. Yeah. That makes sense now. All right. For some reason, it wasn't clicking in my head, and I knew
Yep.
what the question wasn't quite framing right, but now
Yeah.
now I can know where to go. Okay.
Yeah. Good. And I always say, like, that's why I say, like, everybody wants to talk about fast, real time payments and Fed now and all
Yeah.
those things. But if you're just introducing a new way to pay and another system that you got to go in and it's not fully integrated into the tool, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how
Okay.
that's why we like to think about it differently.
Yeah. All right. All right. I get it. That makes sense. Okay. We've covered the importance of automation and how important it is to integrate it within your systems, and and how, gosh, why is my I'll start one more time. Hmm. Sorry. It's that day. This is like I'm traveling starting tomorrow for business, and like there's a lot of things, and I'm like, I gotta focus in, and I'm here. I'm here with you, John.
I know you are.
So we focused a lot on the importance of how automation will work, will revolutionize how you work within your internal systems. But as technology continues to change and advance, as there's many different payment options go out there, I'm sure someday businesses will come to you and say, "Hey, can I pay this invoice with Bitcoin or whatever newest thing is out there?" How can businesses Yeah, exactly. How can businesses really kind of be prepared for those types of questions, especially when you have an automation service in process, but then maybe there's a new system and like, hey, it doesn't integrate properly. And there's so many different situations and examples I'm sure we could give.
Yeah. Well, and look, I think payments is a space that everybody's trying to get into, right? If fintechs
Yeah.
out there offering types of automation and trying to help businesses, right? And they're trying to direct them honestly to payment types that work better for them, right? At Deluxe, we don't think about it that way. We think about kind of modernizing and automating all the rails into one place to allow for the automation of the process, not just
Mm.
the payment piece. And so, when we talk to customers about what this solution is, and they say, well, what about this? What about Bitcoin? What about all the newer types? What's next? Well, we've built a platform to easily be able to add different payment types into our flow. So we're 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 thinking ahead. We've thought ahead about our solution because our solution is this modern stack technology that allows for easy integration with APIs, right? And so we've built it to be able to say, okay, we have these things today. Well, tomorrow there's three new ones. We have an easy way to pull them in. So what my advice to businesses out there and folks in the AP and AR is look for a more comprehensive solution, a solution that can help grow with you and grow
Hmm.
with the changing times. Many things just kind of solve the problem right there. But let's move all your payments to card so that you can get points and those kind of things. That's great, but at some point you look at that and go, that's a little bit expensive for me as a mid-market company. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a
Yeah.
cheaper way. And you know, I'm not looking at charging by the time. We do it differently. And so when you think about this type of solution that fits within what you have today, but is also scalable for tomorrow, that's how we think about our solution,
Mm.
both of them. And so, you know, they're meant to solve for your needs, not my needs. You being the customer.
Yes. Yeah. I like that, looking for a solution that really can grow with you. And as you were saying that, it made me want to kind of just pick your brain a little bit. If somebody's listening to this conversation, they're like, you know what? We don't have a lot of automation in our APAR. This is something I want to look into. Obviously they could look at Deluxe, but if they want to, a lot of times you can't just look at just one company. You got to look at others. What are some questions you should be asking the APAR automation company that that really can kind of get to the nitty gritty of what they should be looking for? What are some things they should be looking for in organizations when they're looking at possible companies?
Solutions. Yeah. First thing, you kind of don't want something just sitting on your platform that then has to be upgraded, right? So you want to think
Hmm.
about something that's neutral, kind of sits. A lot of people talk about the cloud. There's a lot of things happening in the cloud, but a solution that is there where I can update it. I can add those
Yeah.
enhancements. I can make tweaks to it so that I don't have to push them to you and you have to do them, right? So you want something that, allows you the flexibility to add and grow, right? You got to remember these technologies are new, right? They're changing so quickly. So you kind of take something into your environment, just the updating, the cost, the tech resources. So you
Hmm.
want something that minimal implementation, minimal tech costs, minimal ongoing costs, right? So those are things that I would highly recommend that you ask those questions about, and then ask about the roadmap. What do you see as next? I'm happy to talk about real-time payments and Bitcoin and stablecoin and all the rest of them, because as a payments company, that's what we're thinking about. We're not just thinking about, well, we're
Hmm.
a merchant services provider and a check provider, so we only think about those two payment types. We think about them all, and we have to, because that's the solution that we want to provide, right? And we want to provide it to our partners, like our bank partners that sell our products to their customers, and we sell direct. So that's the way we think about it. But that's what I would highly recommend to someone. If you're asking about a solution, make sure it's not something you have to load on, you have to maintain, you have to update
Hmm.
and upgrade, and because that's where they get you. There's just that's they want those additional costs, so they can monetize everything going forward. We don't think about it that way.
Yeah. Are there ways that you can internally prepare your team before you start an automation project?
Yes, absolutely. I think, the pitfalls that I've seen, right, or where you don't really have that kind of kickoff meeting as a team to say, let's identify all of our manual processes. What are we doing? Like Sal, tell me what you do, right? Or Ben, tell me what you do every day. And where they could say, well, I take in this file, then I have to go find the email receipt for this. And because when you get everything on the table and you start to put plot and say, oh wow, we have five systems we go in, it's actually not three, it's five. And we have a check process that we get some good data, but is it in the have that session have that session that says, let's identify all the things that we're doing that we know we can do more efficiently. Then start asking your question, what would you do with that time, right? If you had some data, if you had some insight into how you got paid, who paid you, what time they paid you, right? And you could start
Yeah.
to say, oh, I can increase my DSO, I could, or decrease, right? And you can then start to work on those and have better relationships with your suppliers, right? And so if you map out kind of what are the manual processes, what are the things that you'd like to spend more time doing for the company, right? And then how do you bring that all together? That to me are the pitfalls. People miss that piece, right? Maybe the
Hmm.
CFO says, hey, I saw a great demo or spoke to my banker and they told me they can help automate. Okay, well, what are you automating for? Like, and
Hmm.
bankers would, they might
Yeah.
be a little bit pushy just to say, hey, of course we know that I know my solution works for everybody, right? I know it does,
Yeah.
but you got to get them to kind of make sure they recognize it's there. And when you do that, that's when people go, wow, I really do. Many people haven't plotted their time to say, wow, I do spend 14 hours a month, right? Like they just do. Like you said,
Hmm.
they're machines because they know how to get this stuff done to make their month end, quarter end, right? So bringing those folks together and really understanding what the processes are before you go try to automate them.
Is that sounds like sound advice for anywhere within your organization, whether it's APAR, whether it's you're looking at your ERP systems, whether it's looking at how you budget, do that process because
Purchasing,
you have a chance to look at all your processes and find, hey, is there a better way to do this? Can we save time regardless of whether we're automating something or not? It's very like it's something that we should all be doing just in everyday life, really.
yeah. And most mid-sized companies, it's hard for them because they are. I mean, they're not overly staffed, right? They're skeleton crew, right? And so to take a step back, maybe they could only do it on a Saturday. But you know what? Maybe that is what you need to do just to get a view, because these folks are cranking. I mean, I've been
Hmm.
in this small business customers, and I love talking to the mid-sized companies because you get to see like they're jack of all trades. They're doing multiple things, and so they don't have that second to step back
Hmm.
and say, you know what, let me look at how I do this. And so any one of these companies, that's it.
When we were preparing for this conversation, one thing that we were talking about is like modern tools versus adopting modern thinking, and I figured it'd be a nice like kind of way to kind of wrap up our conversation. Maybe talk about the difference between those and why it's important.
Yeah. So when you talk in the industry, right, people talk about kind of tools, right, and automation. Tools don't automate, right? It's the thinking that transforms. So kind of what I just spoke about, right, is which is stepping
Hmm.
back and thinking about your process, getting your people to think about, you know, what they do and how they could do it more effectively. And here's the thing. There's so many things in today's environments, right? How people never want, like I said, they were never gonna not walk into a bank and do their banking because that was just something that they did. Well, all of a sudden that's changed, and now there's easier ways to do that. So people are adopting changing ways. You just have to kind of bring them back to think about that, right? Because modern finance is about shifting, from the task execution, right, to the decision enablement side of it, right? That's what we're trying to do at Modern Finance, right? Is really help them not just do what they do to get stuff done, but really how do they do it and how insights into that can help them. And so it's a mindset shift. And
Hmm.
as I said, in a mid-market company, it's difficult because you got people doing multiple jobs or they're part-time AR, part-time AP. And so, you know, they're just doing stuff to keep the business running, to get the payment in the door, right, to get cash flow. But, I think getting the CFOs to get their teams to think like that, getting the folks in AP and AR, there's better ways. How do we utilize the data better? How can we, is there something out there that helps integrate AI? Yes, there is. We actually have it, right? So, but, getting them to acknowledge that, getting that mind shift to that modern thinking of what's modern finance really to a mid-sized
Hmm.
company, and it's insights, and you got to get there.
Yeah, and sometimes the smaller organizations take a little bit longer to get to that more modern thinking because they're set in their ways. What's working is working, and they don't want to mess it up. But sometimes you fall behind if you keep doing what's always worked.
Yes, because again, how fast this technology, right, and the advancements
Hmm.
are changing. You used to be able to get away with that because you could keep doing it for a period of time. But because it's changing so fast, you could be left behind now, and that's
Yeah.
worrisome. And again, for someone who grew up with small businesses and mid-market companies that are the backbone of this country, you want them to thrive, you want them to succeed. And so there was a lot of manual process that they could get away with. They can't going forward, and so they don't want to be left behind.
Hmm. They really don't. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast and chatting about this. I hope our audience has gotten as much out of it as I have. And just thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
This has been Count Me In, IMA's podcast, providing you with the latest perspectives of thought leaders from the accounting and finance profession. If you like what you heard and you'd like to be counted in for more relevant accounting and finance education, visit IMA's website at www.imanet.org.